Let's go ahead and run our app one more time. I'm going to hit Command R to run it. And you can see that in the last lesson we were able to safely add these different cells, and each one of these corresponds to a journal entry. Yet when I click on it, nothing happens. And as most of us are used to from using phones and iPods, when we click on a cell in a table view like this, we expect some more information to show up. So we need to go ahead and start to implement that functionality today. And normally, the most common way to do this in iOS is using what's called a navigation controller. And a table view controller is typically embedded into one of these navigation controllers. Well, before we can start to do that, let's first take a look at what a navigation controller does. And again, it automatically manages your series of view controllers. So as we said before, what people are used to is when you tap on something, you get to more information about that. And there should be an easy way to go back and forward within these different view controllers. And again, it would be a pain, but you could do it where you could create the multiple views. You could manually create forward buttons and back buttons and cancel buttons, and then implement the functionality to move between these two. But iOS and Swift have included that functionality for you through what's called a navigation controller. So they've taken a lot of the work out of it for you that we can just use. So let's start to implement that idea into our journal. Let's go ahead and go to our main storyboard. And what we're going to do is we're going to zoom out a little bit so I can see a little more. And I'm going to use my object library, so Command Option L, and type nav, and I'm going to put a navigation controller. Whoops, where am I? Oh, hold on. I'm with my navigation controller on my screen, and you can see by default the navigation controller includes a table view controller with it. But since I don't need that, I can actually go ahead and delete that root view controller. Make sure it's selected, hit delete, and now it is gone. Notice that my entry point is still for my table view controller. I'm actually going to move that to my navigation controller. So now this becomes the entry point. And I need to find some way to associate these two things together. So I'm going to click on my navigation controller. I'm going to control drag to my table view controller. And I'm going to choose the root view controller relationship. And so notice, as I did that, I got a navigation bar at the top here that wasn't before. This prototype cells at the top. Now I have a navigation bar that's going to allow me to put in the save, the cancels, the backs automatically for me, which is kind of nice. So in my journal table view controller, I have these navigation items. I'm going to tap that, and I'm going to change the title to my journal. And you can see that title appears in the navigation bar. It becomes my navigation title. Let's go ahead and run this now to see what effect that has. Notice now I have a navigation bar that says my journal, but I still have the different entries within the table. Again, what I'd like to do is be able to tap one of those entries and have the contents show up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a view controller that's going to show me the contents. So let me just shrink this down a little bit. I'm going to go to my object library and do a new view controller. I'll move it right here. Actually, I'll put it right up here next to this guy. And my new view controller, I'm going to call it a journal entry view controller. So it's what I'm going to use to actually view a particular journal entry. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit here. Line these up. So in order for me to be able to navigate from my table to a particular entry, I need to create a connection between these two. I'm going to hit Control and drag to my view controller, and I get a number of different types of segues. I'm going to use the Show segue from under the selection menu. Notice that there is the segue created that's connecting these two together. So let's go ahead and run this. I'll just pick a random entry to tap on. If I tap on it, you can see that it creates the blank view, but notice it automatically puts in a back button with the title of my navigation bar. So when I tap it, it automatically goes back to that screen. I didn't have to do any of that coding myself. The navigation controller took care of all that. So now we need to be able to display the contents of each different journal entry. And we'll take care of that in the next lesson.